Hello everyone. Today we are going into the second part of the video series. We're going to talk about energy, and this is part one of the energy series. And today we are going to talk about photosynthesis. So, first of all, let's talk about what is photosynthesis and what it does. So, photosynthesis is basically plants making their own food. Plants use sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide to create sugar, which is their food, and they release oxygen as a leftover. So this is the overall formula. Carbon dioxide, water, light energy, and this is ATP, which is energy, and this is oxygen. So there are two steps of photosynthesis. The first step is the light-dependent reaction, and the second is the Calvin cycle, which is also called the light-independent reaction. So the light-dependent reaction, for short, it captures light energy and converts it to short-term chemical energy carriers like ATP and NADPH, and also produces O2. Then the second step is the light-independent reaction, which is also called the Calvin cycle, like I mentioned earlier. This step uses ATP and NADPH from the light reactions to build sugar from carbon dioxide. So the results, it gives you sugar, which can be used to make glucose, sucrose, etc. And the step consumes ATP and NADPH. So if you want to take a look at the steps again. So this is light going into this part of the chloroplast. And they go through like extremely complex steps to produce ATP and NADPH. And then the Calvin cycle is literally a cycle. So this step repeats 6 times, and it creates things. So the first phase of the Calvin cycle is carbon fixation, and the second phase is reduction, and the third phase is regeneration of ribulose. So this is kind of like a cycle that just keeps going and keeps creating these things that they need. And aside from plants that normally use photosynthesis to create energy, there are weird plants. So there are 2 types of these plants, which are C4 plants and CAM plants. So first of all, the C4 plants use a 2-cell system. These plants are corn, sugarcane, and sorghum. For short, they pay a small energy cost to bring out CO2, ensuring the cycle operates at maximum efficiency, which is very useful in hot and sunny environments. And next is the CAM cycle, which is the carcinogen acid metabolism. So these plants include cacti, pineapples, and jade plants. So simply explained, they stockpile raw materials so they can safely manufacture food during the day without losing water. So they kind of work at night. They stockpile these materials at night, and then in the day they use those things they collected at night to get it working. And then here's the actually important part that I wanted to talk about. Why is photosynthesis so important? Why are people in science, like schools always teach about photosynthesis? Why is that the case? Because it's very important for both the plants and us. So first of all, it is the foundation of life. It's like one of the biggest processes that introduces usable energy into the biosphere. And energy conversion, the cycle photosynthesis, it transforms light energy from the sun into sugar, which is a stable chemical energy. And the oxygen we breathe is a byproduct of the water splitting reaction in photosynthesis. So it is very important, because if the trees and the grass and the plants outside of a room or whatever, if they stop doing photosynthesis, if they didn't exist, we would probably be suffering a lot right now. And the next is dual stage process. So photosynthesis consists of two main sets of reactions, like I said earlier, which are the light-dependent reactions and the light-independent reactions, which each they harvest energy and use the energy to create sugar. And lastly, photosynthesis has high global significance because it is the driving force behind the global carbon cycle and helps regulate atmospheric CO2 levels. Because, like I said earlier, photosynthesis, they use carbon dioxide. So all the carbon dioxide in the air, they're using it to create their own energy. And, people talk about the Amazon trees and all that. There's like gigantic forests and jungles. They're important because of this. It's because they absorb carbon dioxide. And let's talk about climate change for a short while. Climate change happens, global warming, they all happen because of high carbon dioxide and all those gases that trap the hot air inside the atmosphere, which is called the greenhouse effect. So if carbon dioxide just constantly ramps up, like for example, driving cars with gas and like all those things that produce carbon dioxide, if carbon dioxide doesn't get absorbed by the plants doing photosynthesis, it's very harmful for us because the greenhouse effect is going to get worse, and therefore the temperatures of Earth will increase. So, yeah, I think we're done here. Why does it feel so short? Never mind, it's actually around 8 minutes, which is great. I initially wanted to talk about these two steps, the light-dependent reaction and light-independent reaction, but I thought it was way too complicated because I tried my best to find ways to explain it simply as possible, but look at the diagrams. I honestly couldn't find a proper way to explain it without just, so I tried my best to shorten the steps up. So I hope you understand the lack of like detailed explanation. Anyway, the next part is going to be about it was going to be about cellular respiration. So cellular respiration is the best friend of photosynthesis because they're both very heavily related. Plants, they don't just do photosynthesis. They also release carbon dioxide as they absorb them through photosynthesis. So, in the next part, we are going to talk about cellular respiration, why it's important, just like the usuals, and I think this is really it. So, thank you for listening, and I'll come back in about another 2 weeks. Thank you.